In the season finale of Jobless Reincarnation, Rudy returns home, and with that comes him having to be the deliverer of bad news regarding Paul, and also introducing Roxy as his potential second wife. So to start to recap, being that Rudy is not too far off from thinking about Man God's warning that he's going to regret going off to save his mother and be with Paul, he's kind of wondering, was Paul the only thing that he was going to potentially regret in terms of him dying, maybe that relationship and stuff like that? So with that in mind, he rushes home thinking that maybe something might have happened to Sylphie, maybe something could happen to Norn, to Aisha, and when he gets into the house and he doesn't see anybody, he's freaking out. But thankfully, Aisha was just in a different room because, lest we forget, Rudy has a big ass house, and it's not clear where Sylphie was, but she comes in through the front door, greets Rudy, and once she's in, everybody's called into the living room, including the people Rudy was just with doing adventuring, and that's when he reveals not only that Zenith is alive, though has memory loss, but also that Paul died, and for his efforts, Rudy lost his hand. Now, as you can imagine, getting to the second topic, while a lot of people are emotional, they're emotional in a way they kind of collapse within themselves in terms of crying and stuff like that, but Norn's a special type of girl, and she decides, instead of kind of collapsing and crying and really letting her feelings out in a more personal, enclosed way, she's ready to lash out. And of course, even though her and Rudy have made strides, she hasn't forgotten everything that she went through with him in the past, so she's ready to go off on him. But with seeing that he's missing her hand, she kind of shifts her perspective to the idea that things must have been bad if this guy, her brother, the person who's supposed to be one of the top mages at this really notable university, if he lost a hand in pursuit of getting their mother back, and he also lost their father, it must have been some type of fight. And with that, she's ready to let it go. However, when everybody leaves and Roxy's still there, and Rudy introduces Roxy as his potential second wife if Sylphie approves of it, all that forgiveness, all that, no one's like, so what you're telling me is you couldn't keep in your pants, and instead you was more worried about some woman who looks damn near my age or is too young for you. And being that Roxy is not the type to go back and forth with people, go off, she decides she's just going to remove herself from the situation. No one's in her feelings and she gets it. So aside from clarifying that she is much more of a woman than she looks, she walks away. And of all people, surprisingly, Sylphie's the one to stop her. And that leads us to the third topic, which is that Sylphie figured sooner or later something would happen. And it being Roxy, in some ways, it kind of comes as a shock, because at this point Sylphie is still very much pregnant, about a month away from giving birth. But Sylphie has known who Rudy is for a long time, and even before they started dating, she was aware of his sexual appetite. I mean, lest we forget, Rudy is the guy who had a shrine to Roxy's underwear for a good portion of this show. So him having that panty altar, how he's talked about Roxy for years, and now getting to meet her, Sylphie kind of loses the insecurity that she kind of had, or even jealousy, and being that she sees herself in Roxy, she seemingly is fine with the idea of sharing Rudy with her. And with that, it's made into a plan that after Sylphie gives birth to Lucy, Rudy's first child, that's when Roxy and Rudy will get married. Which leads to the last topic, which is just everybody becoming, to a certain degree, a big happy family. Now, Norn is still very much pissed about how Rudy's not being really punished or anything for what he did or didn't do. So while those two are finding a new way to bond as he teaches her how to use their father's sword, she's being very aggressive with him, and he gets it. This is a better way of her working it out than yelling, screaming, or perhaps going to a dark place as seemingly is a trend in the family. But, she's still a bit much. As for Aisha, luckily for her, Lilia is alive and well, so yes, she may have lost her father, but at the very least, unlike Rudy and Norn, she still has her mom who's not only conscious, but fully there. And they share a cute moment in which, strangely, Aisha asks, or seemingly wants permission to embrace her mom and kind of set aside that she is some type of help in a family. And as we'll note in the highlights, it's one of those tear-inducing moments. And outside of them, Zenith, she does show signs that maybe she could potentially recover, because as Rudy lays out his father's arm and weapons, Norn takes the sword, and I haven't played an RPG in a while, so I forgot what it's called. I think it's an armband or something like that. And Zenith holds those close to her, so there's a sign that maybe somewhere she's in there, maybe she recognizes that it's Paul's stuff, but it's so hard to say. But pretty much Lilia says that she's going to dedicate her life to taking care of Zenith, and maybe that'll help things when it comes to her and Aisha having to divvy up chores, because Aisha makes it very clear that I'm not giving up my duties just because you're here. Which in some ways is comical that this child is fighting her mom to clean up the house and take care of people, but Aisha really loves her mom, doesn't look down on her, so this is the type of life she wants to live. Not only that, that's how she feels like she contributes to the household. So when all is said and done, yes, this is still a bit of a dysfunctional family and definitely an odd one, but it is one that is finding its way so that it can work despite how it may look from the outside. So getting to the review portion, the top highlight is definitely going to be the tears that you shed. Whether it's when Norn learns that her father's dead, whether it's Aisha being given permission to set aside her role or duties and embrace her mom, those had me messed up. And even when Rudy is looking at his daughter and, he's crying because, he's being given another chance to, even if he couldn't be the perfect child, maybe he can be the kind of father that would have the relationship that he didn't pursue with his parents. There's a lot going on here, and it's one of those moments that remind you that when it comes to Jobless Reincarnation, yes, there are moments that are definitely messed up, moments that can be definitely perverted, but at the same time, the core of this show is that we're watching people in this fantasy world who have real emotions, who go through different things, and it's not just an adventure of the day. It's not this case of somebody dies, it's maybe a 1 or 2 episode thing with people crying and they move on. Almost everything has a lasting impact, and it affects the characters almost immediately, and you see how it unravels from episode to episode, from core to core, from season to season. And perhaps the best example of that would be Norn, because even though Norn is by no means my favorite character, you have to respect the type of reaction she can get out of you. Her learning about her father's death hits you almost as hard as when Paul initially died, and watching her cry, watching her want to lash out at Rudy but didn't recognize that she can't blame him. So you see in the long term she kind of blames herself for not being strong enough to actually do something. It sends you in a world of emotions when you love her, empathize with her one moment, hate her for lashing out at Rudy the next, yet at the same time you also recognize that she's still a child who's dealing with these new emotions, new experiences, and She lives in a world where, yes, she might be the only person in her family with some type of faith, but she just got forsaken by the gods. Her brother, who's supposed to be one of the strongest people around, couldn't save her father. Her father died a death, and the only thing that they got out of it was their mother, who is so out of it that she may be physically there and present, but mentally she's not. And it makes you kind of question, was it worth it? And again, she just has so much going on. And even though she has Aisha, even though she has Rudy, even though she has Lilia to a certain degree, she doesn't have necessarily her own person. And I think the best way to kind of compare it would be if you watch Interview with a Vampire, especially the new TV series. In many ways, I would compare Norn to Claudia in the case of she has a family, she has people she's connected to, but she doesn't have her own person. She doesn't have someone that's absolutely in her corner no matter what. And because of that, it's frustrating for her when people like Rudy kind of not necessarily abandon her, but show that while they may care, they're always looking for something else. It's an issue when it comes to Lilia, who's not her mom, that, she's never going to be her number one. And even in terms of Aisha is the type who is so committed to the role that she has, she can't be what Norn wants or needs her to be. So with that in mind, all Norn really has is herself, and after a certain point, you can't be everything for your own person. You need someone to help when you're not feeling 100%. And unfortunately, at this junction of Norn's life, she not only doesn't have that, but it's not even clear if this location where she is with her brother, if she can find it either. Which leads to the next highlight, which is just Sophie's love for Rudy, even though I have to admit it's sort of an on-the-fence topic in a way as well. And the reason I say that is because I love how Sophie knows who her husband is and gives him the type of grace where she knew that something was going to happen. If it's with Roxy, that's a good thing. But a part of me wants to question, where's this coming from? Like, I get that when she was a child, she was bullied, and Rudy was her first friend. I get that he's her first and potentially only love, and seeing him again was probably like the happiest thing that's happened to her in a long time. I also get that she was with the princess, Ariel, I believe it's her name, since I don't think we've seen her in quite some time. But anyway, we haven't seen her in quite some time, and when it comes to Ariel, she kind of adapted to being a subservient role. So yes, that should be considered a factor in why she's so forgiving and adaptable when it comes to Rudy. But I feel like in many ways that Sophie is very much existing within an ideal, and as she becomes a mother, as she deals with being the first wife of two and really settles into marriage, and it's not going to be, cute little sex sessions and stuff like that, we're going to potentially see a more, I don't want to say a dark side to Sophie, but I feel like just as much as her body's changing, hairstyle's changing, there's going to be a shift in who she is. And it's not going to be like a shocking thing, but it's definitely going to remind you that there's more to her than just being someone's little wife. Which leads to the last highlight, which is very simple, and that's just that in, I believe, the credits, we got an Era sighting. So I can only hope, similar to how between season 1 and 2 we got a OVA which featured Eras, maybe they'll do the same between season 2 and 3, which has been confirmed, but fingers crossed on that one. But overall, when it comes to Jobless Reincarnation, it continues to perhaps be one of the few shows I can think of offhand, besides Better Things and with the E, that continually leaves us wanting more in the best way. And while it may have a couple of moments, maybe an episode or two that leaves us frustrated, overall, those issues are so minor that they're easily forgiven and forgotten.